Welcome to Getting Intimate with Intimacy. I am Jamie London Wollberg. My pronouns are he, they.
I'm Katie Jayne, she, her.
And I am May. This is a space for deep exploration of the mind, body, and soul connection.
Getting Intimate with Intimacy covers consistent multimedia content spanning all forms of intimacy, from sexual to intellectual, and everything in between.
Our content is created for all beings, bodies, and abilities, age 18 and up.
And it can be enjoyed on YouTube as well as OnlyFans and Inside Timer. The links will be in the description on for our live streams.
We're really looking forward to experiencing the infinite layers of intimacy with you.
And remember, intimacy starts within.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to Getting Intimate with Intimacy. We are back for episode 21, our part 3, deep diving that much further into the question, how has the societal sexualization of the human body affected our lives and intimacy? We're going to give you a little recap on the last episode, but before we do, let's tap on in and say hello. Namaste, I'm Jamie, he, they pronouns.
I am Katie Jayne, she, her, they.
I am May. Hello from my heart.
And we are here to get intimate with intimacy and share together. If something comes up for you in the session, feel free to comment and we will tap on in when we can. But we have definitely a lot of conversation to continue. May, did you rewatch and you were excited to do the recap, or you want me to do the recap?
I will do a slight recap. Maybe you have more details. But firstly, I talked about my experience in Ethiopia and how I realized that breasts there are experienced in a very different way than in the Western world. So they're not sexualized over there. Katie went on explaining how her first intercourse happened and what was the impact for her and different situations around it, and how late she was in understanding her own body. Like, she didn't have any proper sex education at an early age, like most of us. Not so early with any of us, but anyway, she had it quite late in her life. And Jamie had a kind of intimate experience with another child when they were young, out of curiosity, and how that turned out to affect him when people find out, and the interpretations around it. And what else did we? Oh, then we talked a lot about sexual education, how we think it should start. It should be more thorough. It should be more comprehensive, more positive, more inclusive. And when would be the ideal age to start teaching this, either at home or at school? And I can't recall anything
The
else.
importance of having parents involved in this education.
Yes, of course.
And having parent support groups around it as well.
To be more or less in line from both places, because the children pick up a lot from either home and either school. So we need to be on the same page.
Yes.
What else, Jamie?
You did super well. The only thing that I would say that I really want to add in the context of the sexual education that we talked about was the importance of information in order to build acceptance and also to reduce and clear up confusion, because that was creating a lot of fear and a lot of the narratives that we realized. And we had also talked about how it's important to consider not separating so much between the sexes and genders, at least in the early years, because it builds a lot of confusion for those who may not align within those narratives. But actually, I realized as I was re-listening to the episode earlier today, I realized that it's actually still important that even though we honor having time to have that separation for those who feel safest, that this is also important as we get older, because what ended up happening is most people have no idea about anyone who doesn't have a body like them. and let alone barely understand their own body. And that is part of how confusion gets, and it gets more confusing, and it makes it therefore pretty difficult to give informed consent, and how much we wanted to make sure that consent was the foundation of everything. And May, you wanted to talk about desires today, and we had also said that we wanted to we focused a lot on youth, and we wanted to focus talking about teenagers and college years as well when it came to things. Anything else, KJ? Anything that you feel that you didn't cover?
Oh no, did a great job on the recap. That was fabulous. One other thing I'd like to touch on today that kind of builds on what we're talking about, which is just recap. We talked about having the parental support groups in early education, which is super valuable for sure. And I feel like another interesting topic to explore would be, support groups for teenagers, like peer support groups.
Mm-hmm.
So along with the education, the option, not like a demanded or expected or required, I guess, support group, but like the option, right there to build that community. Because in many different cultures, when a girl comes of age, they have a whole separate camp with women. They talk about their period or they're menstruating together, right? Like there's a whole different support group around it, kind of just built into cultural traditions. And so I think that would be a cool addition, right? A beneficial addition, just to be like, hey, we're going through the same stuff in our bodies, normalizing that and supporting and having that element of community available, not required, but if folks of either genders, wanted that support, it's there.
I love that concept. As I was listening to you, I was like, what support did I have? And there's a part of me, I think, that thought I had a little bit more support than I'm realizing that I had. But there's also support in friends doing the best they can to sort of support each other from where they're at, which is 99.9% misinformation and trauma. I don't remember having I don't feel like there was a day where I was like, wow, I feel so supported right now around my period and sexuality. Not till probably college. And that wasn't from a sexual education course. So we have a lot of ground to cover today. May, I know that you didn't get to touch upon it last time, and that was something you really want to do. So shall we start with sexual desires? Where do you want to begin?
Okay, one thing I just want to pick up where Katie touched on today, which is the groups. I had also thought about how important that is. And I think that both separate groups and mixed groups are necessary. I will give you a little example of what I experienced recently between youngsters, and it was in Tanzania, where I was on Christmas, and I was helping out at a rescue center for girls. And exceptionally, there were two boys in their 16th, 17th years. And so when I was giving a speech about woman empowerment and self-consciousness, I noticed that one of them was in pain. And I asked her what was going on, and she didn't say anything. But because of her body language, I thought, I think she's on her period. And so at some point she didn't say, but another girl around her, she told me. And I just said very respectfully that she shouldn't be ashamed to say that out loud. I emphasized that I was not forcing her. I was just emphasizing the fact that it's something absolutely natural and normal. And whether there are men or boys around shouldn't change the fact that it's still something natural. And because they are Christians, I also bring into them the notion that that's God created, like the body is the way it is, and it's the way it is designed for us to bear children and everything. And I also invited them to reflect, if you don't share how your body works, how your body is, and how you feel about it with men, how do you expect them to understand you better or support you when you need it? So, both for the two boys who were there and the girls, they didn't say much because they're not used to express themselves often. This was challenging for them, but of course, it's not my place to push anyone outside of what is natural, common, or cultural for them. But I would just bring them into reflecting and making natural everything that is natural. So my point was, in the end, don't be ashamed of anything that comes naturally with your body. Like I said, we also have to pull. That's part of the design. There's nothing we can do about it. And the more you feel ashamed or disgusted about natural things, it's going to make your human experience much more difficult. And so that was one of the point. And the other point was, make the boys part of it as soon as possible, in the most natural way, again, for the benefit of all of us. And so that's what I was saying, that separate groups are important, and then mixed groups are equally important for everybody to be aware of how the others experience, other genders experience, how their bodies function, and how they experience themselves or their gender or their roles in society or whatever.
It sounds like we all came to the same conclusion on that one. That
Okay.
for both the separation and having also together
Mm-hmm.
is critical in order to create clarity. KJ, did you want to add on?
Yeah. So what occurred to me while May was talking, which was all excellent, exactly what we're aiming at, right? We're talking about the new narratives that we'd like society to live by, which is acceptance and normalizing, and having an awareness of what's natural, right? And how to support around that in a positive educational sense. And so what occurred to me was that having more of those kinds of mixed experiences like May is referring to will be so beneficial, because I believe that all three of us couldn't agree that there's a huge disparity in our experiences growing up of men versus women having to explain to the other gender how their body works, which is wild, or telling, right? Like in my experience, what I was told about my body from somebody of the other gender, like, so crazy. That shouldn't even have to be a thing, right? Like that shouldn't have to be, that's another layer of, often I think, of us internalizing the shame. And like, I have this emotional labor of having to tell my partner, my potential sexual partners, how my body works. Kind of a buzz killer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, I'm just wanted, that's occurred to me when I was listening to you, because then it wouldn't, everybody would know, and it would be more natural, and take that element of, again, confusion and angst out of it.
Well, and to add to that, KJ, in doing that, that we wouldn't even have a situation of emotional labor later,
Right.
because
That's
the trauma wouldn't be there.
yeah.
So and that's like, as you said, the emotional labor, but like the reason the emotional labor is even there, the reason it feels like emotional labor, is not just because of the confusion, but it's because of the trauma, and it all feeds into each other. So if there's the awareness, then a lot of the things that happen wouldn't happen. Like a lot, at least I'll speak for myself. I firmly believe that it's misinformation and a true confusion around consent that from an early age is where a lot of our trauma and issues stem from. I don't actually think that as many people as are portrayed to have malicious intentions out the gate are having that, especially when they're young. I just think they don't know. I think that's how my situation happened when we were, 6, because trying to bring myself back there, especially now being like 36, like that was 30 years ago. I'm trying to pull back and bring context and clarify from all of that. And then it came up later at that whole, like the reveal and the rumor mill. I mean, it's tough to heal these things, but if we can start with that clarity, then we prevent. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about with preparedness, that we all want to feel prepared, because when we feel prepared, we feel safe.
Yeah, and at the same time, like another important aspect as we are working towards these changes, right, is so much compassion, because we have well established everybody has some level of trauma around this whole thing and this experience of being human, right? So being able to extend that compassion, like take a minute, like even if you, so say you run into a context or a conversation or an experience with another person that's also an adult, and you have a conflict and you're like, you get triggered or something flares up in you that's like, I don't agree. Like it takes 2 seconds to take a couple of breaths and drop into your body and say, hey, I had a different experience, maybe about the same topic. And how was that actually for me? How did I experience that? Oh, that was kind of messed up, or it gave me trauma for X number of years. So maybe even though this person's experience is different, I could have some compassion because I'm sure that was hard for them. And they're sharing it, like also honoring. I think there's not enough like thanking people for sharing their experiences, right? Because the immediate response is defensiveness due to the layers of trauma and confusion that we've been discussing. So widely, society, people tend to have their barriers up or to go to that defensiveness first, like there's something wrong. But even if somebody is sharing a triggering event, maybe that's all they're doing. They're trying to get witnessed. So that ability to right, hold space non-judgmentally when somebody does bring something forward, and then we can look at it, together to heal and to move forward.
Thank you for making that point, KJ. And it brings us back to my favorite thing that I love to remind you all of, that the fact that we belong, and we're all looking for that belonging, that unconditional love. Go ahead, May. I've seen you taking notes. I feel like you're old.
There's too many things, but I'm just going to focus now on something that I think is very relevant. Just Katie mentioned the compassion. When on last episode, I mentioned that when I was very young and went to the beach with my parents, I would feel called to remove my bikini, the lower part, and I wasn't allowed to do that. Then when I became an adolescent, I remember certain relatives, when I wanted to cover my body, because then I started having shame. I'm not saying that it's my family's fault. I think it's just a social thing. Then I would remember them saying, we all have the same, you shouldn't cover. And while that is true, on the other hand, the way our sexual or body parts look is so different that it can be called biologically that's the same, but aesthetically it looks so different that is actually for me not a reason to say, oh, I don't think I have exactly the same as my sisters or other female friends that I have slightly seen naked, on the one hand. And on the other hand, it's not for you to decide whether I should feel comfortable getting naked or not in front of you. So no criticism there for them. I'm just pointed out that I think in this youth groups should be pointed out quite intensely how our bodies look different and how important it is to not say, and I'm going to bring out another topic here, to make any kind of comment that may look just kind of informal and kind of not very serious, not very offensive. And yet, when you make a comment, because it has happened to me, to some people who their self-worth may be attached to their beauty or to how they have body dysmorphia or whatever, it can cause a trauma, the slightest comment. And I remember several comments throughout my life when I got naked, which at some point brought huge shame and insecurity to share my body naturally with people in general and men in particular. So, also to point out how important it is to not make any kind of remarks if they're not clearly positive, whether you like it a little bit less or more, where you think that person has something that is very different to most people or to what you have or whatever. It's not necessary that you actually say that unless it's clearly on a positive tone and a positive remark. I think it's very important that we are very careful when we are naked what we say about other people's bodies.
I agree. And what you and KJ brought up are very deep. It's like very deep self-awareness, right? Which like a lot of people don't have right out the gate. So if people are reflecting outward and projecting their shame onto people when they make these comments or when they, however they approach these situations, we need to create space for how we're going to heal this. The young ones, hopefully, if in shifting education and being more open-minded and listening a lot more and holding that space, hopefully they won't have to deal with these things. But if you're probably, millennial and older,
Mm-hmm.
Gen
Mm-hmm.
Z and older, then you've got a lot of stuff to clear up, and that's different for people. And so, you know, it's because like as I listen to what you're sharing, May, it brings up two very opposing stories that like mirror yours in a way, and I didn't put two and two together until just now because I've heard you tell me this story a few times, even off of our off of this. And what it shows me is like the reason it's confusing is because we have these directly opposing narratives for children and then for adults, and
Mm-hmm.
there's as if there's no in between, there's like no acknowledgement of what happened. So like for me, I think I've mentioned on like a while ago on a previous episode that when I was really young, like around that same age, May, I feel, as when you were expressing when you were on the beach, I was gardening with my dad, and I would garden in the front yard, whatever. And he would let me be like topless and like wear overalls or whatever and be running around. One day, suddenly, nosy parents and neighbors decided to start commenting on my parents. And I don't remember too much other than one specific time where I remembered my dad reassuring me that it was totally okay for me to be doing this and ignore them.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, I have my top surgery, and I am also mostly bedridden and we're still like recovering, and literally at that time really bedridden, recovering from surgery at my parents' place. All I've wanted in my life is to feel the freedom and support that I felt from my dad in that moment when I was topless. Because at that time, of course, I was not remotely developed. So it basically
Mm-hmm.
looked and felt the most alignment. So I'm starting to heal from my surgery and my drains out, whatever. And my dad will not allow me to be in vision of anybody with my shirt on. And he directly tells me that I can't, especially if anybody is over. And so I don't know if you feel, May, like there's a mirroring between our stories, but I feel I feel there's a mirroring where there's this dichotomy of these two different stories of two different ages of like, yes, this is okay, no, this is not okay. For it's reversed in the sense for you, it was like it was not okay initially and then it was okay. But either whichever direction you go in, it's still a different narrative that's directly rubbing up the other one, and it creates shame. And even though my dad supported me at that young age, I knew what was being said about me. And so I had that shame from other parents who were, of course, predominantly moms, if not entirely.
Mm. And thank you, dear, for sharing that. We go back to the topic that we touched on last week about the sexualization of the breast. Who decides that we as women should cover ourselves, until when, from where? And I really don't think it's fair. Something that I did to reclaim my right to be, at least with my bra, shirtless, almost everywhere, was after my spiritual awakening. I started doing something, and it's not that I was not slightly uncomfortable, but I thought that that was going to help men and women become more natural about it. So when I would go into the mountains and it was hot, I would wear a sportive bra and I would just remove my shirt, just like so many men that I would cross around, that they were shirtless. That was one place that I was doing it 100% of the time when I was hot. So I was not forcing myself. Is I'm hot, I want to remove my shirt, and I'm doing it. And the other place where I was doing it is in every spiritual retreat where I would go, where there is more of a natural and very friendly and respectful environment. I would normally be the first woman to remove my shirt when there were already a few men around, if it was hot again, without the shirt. And after me doing it, either that day or the next day, there were maybe one or two women who would do the same. And these are just small things that I think we can do if we want to, but just to reclaim that if they have the right to be around without a shirt, I have the same right to be around without a shirt, period.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 1000%. In fact, I'm sure somewhere on the internet there's pictures of me in my bra jumping around the Washington Square fountain at the end of Dyke March, because that is what
Nice.
is tradition at the end of that march. And a lot of female-bodied individuals who march in Dyke March will be topless. That's like a big part of the thing. um, and I think that I over years I noticed more and more people doing it, May. So I think it is important to talk about. We do inspire people with our courage, and it's not about forcing anything. It's just about doing what feels good for you. And there's always this part of me that's just frustrated. It's like, are they really hurting anybody? Like, can you just, like, if someone is not causing harm to anyone else, do you really need to say anything about it? You're welcome to have your opinions and whatever the case may be, but like, don't you want to just like be, you know? And it's hard for me not to go there when we're talking about this, because I'm so passionate about people just
Mm.
being able to be themselves and unapologetically and
And non-violently, like there's no violence, no whatsoever. So why do we have to protect everybody from seeing naked bodies and from talking about sex? I really don't understand. I try, but I don't understand.
Well, I think that's a big part of why we became passionate, the three of us, to come
Yes.
together and have these roundtable discussions. Um, I'm loving this conversation so far, but I feel in integrity to you, May, I want to make sure that we talk about sexual desires, because that was something that you had stated
True.
several times that you really want
True.
about. We're already half an hour in because time flies when you're having fun, interesting discussions about loving bodies.
So something that I have been reflecting a little bit on is, where is the limit, the difference between curiosity, eroticism, sexual intention, consent, asking for it, or understanding where there is consent from the other part. And this is something that if we helped children from an early age to understand these things, like, but I have seen this, thank God I don't have children, but thank God that I have 5 nephews and nieces, so that I have been able to see, and in a very small age and all very close together, how they interact and how they react to nakedness and other topics that are very relevant for us. And I would have loved to be naked with them, because that's what I think that is best, especially until 7 years old. After that, according to most psychologists, there is a more of an adult consciousness, and you may want to be cautious. Yes or no, that's up to you. But until 7, most agree that it's absolutely harmless from most points of view. So you can explain to a child at some point, and I have seen this in them, that they are curious, especially about what is different. So if I'm this gender and you have this other gender, I want to see what you have down there. What is this thing that you have there? And how come it is so different from what I have? And I may want to touch it because I'm curious. This is so natural from a child, is one of their greatest qualities. And it is, in essence, from every human being, curiosity. Now, if we find out a child being curious about other children's bodies, we shouldn't make a big deal, I think, a big deal about it. Shame, overreact, get serious, or dramatic about it in any way, or shame them. Is if in advance you explain, we have different bodies because of the genders or because of how naturally you are designed, and it's okay to be curious, but before you put your hands in other people's bodies, you should ask permission. Then it could also happen that 6 years old, one asks the other one permission to touch, and the other one says yes because they don't see any harm about it. Then what happens. What can we do about it? Once it has happened, because it has come out naturally from 2 little human beings, what can we do about it? It's going to be part of their experience, of the human experience that happened. I don't think we should get too dramatic about not allowing children to be alone, because that could happen, because just mainly they're being curious. Then at a more advanced age, sexual desire is going to come up. Okay, and this is clearly where we need to come in to make a very clear understanding that just because you experience desire and how that may feel in your body or in your mind, or however we can help a child or adolescent be aware of what the sexual desire looks like so that they quickly identify it, then we need to help them be very aware that because you have a sexual desire doesn't mean that you have to go after it, especially if by that it means I have to approach the other person and do something with the other person's body, whether you ask for consent or not consent. So first of all, is like, be aware that I'm having a sexual desire. I may have the option to just let it go. I may have the option to masturbate, make it so natural. But when it comes to the other person's body that I am attracted to, that's where we need to stop, to think, to be aware, to understand whether there is actually any kind of, if it's an appropriate moment, if the other person is interested at all, if they have the capacity to explain clearly what they want and how they want it, or whatever, like to help them put them in advance in several different scenarios where they can act in the most respectful and mature way towards themselves and towards others. And if something happens outside of that, there's nothing we can do about it. But at least I think we can make the body natural, make them aware of how important it is to respect, to understand desire, and then to act maturely in the highest way that it's possible to them according to their age, and to what is the best way to proceed towards yourself and towards others.
I'm just breathing all of that in, May. That was a really great overview, and I agree with everything you said. There were two things that really spoke to me that came up as you were sharing about the young ones, and something that I was thinking about is, we spoke about this a little bit in the first episode about the technological advances, right? And how that's bringing about awareness at a younger age. Because it's like, as we talked about last time, I agree, 7 feels, we do have a lot about that, and it made me think of the Gene Keys, how the Gene Keys talks about 7 and 12.
Yeah.
But all of these were basically coming through before the tech revolution that we have now. And then another thing that I haven't thought about actually probably until this moment that is possibly relevant here is that not only do we have more awareness, which doesn't always mean educated awareness, it's just, in the same way of like, if someone's really young and they see a porn, like, doesn't mean they understand what's going on just because they see it. There's different, there's awareness, and then there's like understanding what you're actually becoming aware of. But hormones, we have more hormones in our food now than we once did. And the culmination of the amplification of technology with the amplification of sexualization, with the amplification of hormones, this is like probably speeding things up at least a year or two. Because even again, like, my situation was when I was 6. And so it makes me wonder, like, how can we start even younger? And, because I think what they used to say, at least, I don't know if this is, and this is a question that I have now within this, is like, there used to be this saying, whether it had science merit or not, but there was definitely a saying of like, a child starts to understand how to say no when they're around the age of 2. I bet that's way sooner now, depending on the cognitive abilities of that child. So if you have strong cognitive capacities, and then on top of that, you have access to this technology and the food and all of that, what does that mean? Like, because, for example, I was speaking very young, way before I could walk. So, and like, I mean, according to my parents, I was kind of like a mini version of me now. Like, I definitely knew how to say no. But interestingly enough, 6-year-old Jamie in that situation, I don't recall if I said no. And so it's sort of like, if no and yes are directly connected to consent and desire, that means that and this is where I'm linking back into how we're desire now. We have desires, maybe not sexual desires, obviously, but we have desires of some kind from a very young age. So what might be possible for us if even prior to the sexualization and sexual desire, we focus on consent around within desire? Like, what could that look like? And what are the steps that are healthy? And I think, I mean, many of us, I'm sure, can reflect on from a very early age, asking for something or saying you wanted something and being told no and internalizing that as shame. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, both of you, of course.
Katie, you go.
Yeah, it's just what we are all talking about is teaching consent, and right at a safe and positive, along with all of the awareness and positive informational education, right, is teaching about consent. I saw a comment, we'll get to you soon, that brings us back up. Yeah, most of us living adult lives now didn't know nothing about consent. Yeah. Occam says early education and body awareness, respect of self and others. And I think that's when May was talking. By the time I was told about bad touch or stranger danger, I had already been sexually active for 2 years. I think that's a pretty common story, right? That's what we've all kind of touched on. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a shared experience for a lot of people our age, right? We had no context of safety or consent or consent being violated, right? That's a common story. You do your best, right? But if other people don't have the same education or narratives or self-awareness, what can you do? Like May said, at a certain, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen, right? To a degree. And the other thing that like it reminded me of is I believe in the last episode, I did touch on my story of not losing my virginity until I was 26, right? So again, in the current system, in the current lived experience that we have, it's a common experience for children, unfortunately, right? To have these negative experiences or experiences that were born out of confusion or misinformation that are so impactful later in life. Because again, thinking about this, I believe around age 7 that I had some kind of predatory experience in the church. I don't remember. I've really blocked it out. If that was something that happened, like there's a block still for me energetically. And I'm not saying that I need to remember. I know what I know. And my intuition, it was a confirmation of my intuition about a certain individual that I never liked, like one of my best friends' fathers, right? So, and again, due to my warped teaching or lack of education due to the church, I like shut that down. I didn't even think about sexual desire until my mid-teens, right? And then again, surrounded by shame and confusion and doubt. There's just, of course, these are the kinds of stories that we want to eradicate, right? This is the point of the conversation about changing the narrative in society. Occam says more talk about the difference between consent versus coercion would go a long way, especially in high school. Yes. 10 out of 10 recommend Occam. You go back and listen to our last 2 episodes and the beginning of this one, because I know you didn't catch the beginning, and we appreciate you being here. Yeah, such an important conversation, right, about consent. And like, that is the vision that we're talking about, right, is having more positive education from an appropriate age to avoid this trauma, like Jamie said earlier. Like, it's due to the existing trauma and the generations of existing trauma that we are working to change the narrative so that we have children enjoy their youth, right? Have that innocence, like be naked at 4 years old and no, it's not a big deal because you're a baby.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that you can inspire sexual desire on someone else, which is something that I'm deeply reflecting on lately, it shouldn't be a reason for you to have to constantly cover yourself.
Right.
I try to understand why in society we have made a problem out of this, and we call it like it's a protection, as if the human being was a constant threat to its own self constantly, or men were a constant threat to women. I mean, if we all progress into naturalizing the human body, what is the harm to activate sexual desire in others? if others know how to behave properly and um, and manage their own sexual desire, where is the matter? Why should I have to cover myself? Why should we make sex such a taboo? Like, it's not such a big deal. And it's not something, uh, from my perspective at least, wrong or dirty or that has to be necessarily private. I think it's very exciting to watch adults having consented sex. And I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that, but it's just that it has not been ever naturalized or normalized. But why not? Why not make it more common or more natural? And the other thing that I wanted to say is the age difference. So if we have maybe some form of a erotic interaction with another 7-year-old or 8-year-old, it may not be traumatic at all if both of us are curious and we're just looking here, touching there, and nothing too serious about it. There is no desire to harm. There's no desire to abuse. There's just curiosity. But when the age gap is huge, there's normally, I think, where the trauma really comes, because I think even in the most unconscious place of you, even if you are not understanding what is going on, and even if your body is not experiencing any kind of pain or whatever, there is a part of you who feels that the other person is using their own power to create a situation where they're trying to take something out of you that you have not fully consented and that is not natural for you. But you may not be aware of that until an older age. And thank God that many people don't experience that. But those who do, this is my understanding. I may be completely wrong. But the difference between children playing together and exploring together as to an adult and a child, it's a huge difference, huge. So what I'm trying to say is that to normalize a little bit more that children it's natural that they can have their own interest in exploring each other. And I think there's nothing wrong unless one of them is feeling abused, of course.
All good points, May. I think, look, we're not going to solve
Nope.
all of this in 3 episodes. Probably not 3 days. Probably not 3 months.
3
Maybe not
years.
weeks. I do feel like we've had some really valuable conversation, and hopefully, those who have tuned into these 3 episodes feel seen, heard, and supported, and maybe it unlocks some things for you to get a support around and unpack things. And remember that we are here for you. We do offer workshops, we do offer speaking, we do offer sessions, really, as well as the three
Coaching.
of us all together. If you enjoy getting support in this method, just you wait. And we are about to shift around our format a little bit more to get things even more exciting. We're going to elaborate on that next week. But in the meantime, you can definitely watch our previous 2 episodes. Make sure that you like and subscribe so that way you can go back, and we actually have a podcast playlist so that everything is super easy for you and you can listen to it as many times as you like in order. And I will put our webpage down that has the links to all the different locations that we put various types of content, and we'll be expanding on our types of content. And next week, we are going to be diving into exactly what we wanted to talk about. We almost unraveled this entire topic to talk about periods because the three of us got so excited. And it was my turn. We actually, little known behind the scenes fact is that we rotate who chooses the questions, and to be in fairness, it was my turn. And I was like, okay, we are definitely talking about periods for the next 3 weeks. That's happening. So we're going to come back, and we are going to navigate this magical question, which is, How has society's narratives on menstruation impacted the intimacy of all humans? So, we are looking
Nice.
forward to talking all things periods with you. Regardless of your gender, you're going to want to be here because hidden secret, not so hidden, not only women have periods. And this conversation, if you didn't know that, is going to blow your freaking mind. So, we will see you all next week. And remember, intimacy
This starts
starts with
Yes.
with it.
we love you unconditionally.
Much love.
Namaste.
Thank you.